Welcome to the Tianxing Mental Health Center. To ensure the safety of both you and the patients, please read these rules carefully and follow them strictly. Otherwise, you must bear the consequences. This center houses exactly 1,200 patients, with the number in each ward fixed at 30. If you enter a ward and find fewer than 30 people, stop moving immediately, close your eyes, and count to 60 in silence until you hear the sound of rhythmic chewing nearby. Please note that there are no nurses wearing red uniforms in this center. If you see a nurse in red, do not make eye contact, and report immediately to the nearest staff member in green. If the green-clad staff member starts to laugh upon hearing your report, run immediately to the restroom at the end of the corridor and lock the door. No matter whose voice you hear from outside, do not open it until the broadcast starts playing. Jasmine flower. During visitation, do not give any solid food to patients, especially meat. If you notice a patient gnawing on their own fingers, pretend not to see it, and continue your conversation normally. If a patient asks you for the current time, respond with, "It is 4:04 in the morning," regardless of what the actual time is. Remember that all clocks in the center are unreliable. If you find a clock on the wall running backward, lie flat on the floor and bark like a dog. This will effectively reduce the hostility of certain entities. The center does not have a basement level 2. If you see an option for B2 in the elevator, do not press it. If the elevator stops at B2 automatically, press the close button frantically the moment the doors open and hold your breath until the elevator returns to the first floor. Visitation hours are from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. If you have not left the center after 4, you must put on any white lab coat you can find on the corridor benches, and insist that you are an intern doctor. Never admit to being a visitor, or you will be included in the permanent staff count. When dining in the cafeteria, only choose vegetarian dishes. If the server gives you a piece of braised pork, reject it politely and say, "I do not eat my own kind." The server will smile at you, and replace it with vegetables, which means you are temporarily safe. Pay attention to the mirrors in the wards. If the reflection you see has no facial features, back away slowly until you exit the room. If you see a child pushing a cart in the hallway selling eyeball candy, give him a coin and take the candy, but never eat it. Hold it in your palm until it melts into blood. This will ensure you do not get tripped by your own shadow when leaving. Finally, remember the director's name is Wang, not Li. If you see an office door labeled Director Li, turn around immediately and leave. Walk at a steady pace until you see the sun outside. If the sky you see outside is purple, return to the center and repeat the steps until the sky is blue again. Confirm whether the corridor walls are pale yellow or deathly white. If they are white, you have entered the isolation zone. Crouch down and look for cracks in the floor. If red liquid flows from the cracks, lick it clean to prove your loyalty. Do not touch any ward door handle unless it is ice cold. Remember that no staff member at the nurse station is taller than 1.8 meters. If you see a nurse 2 meters tall, tell her you have already taken poison. She will leave satisfied and mark your record as deceased. All windows in the center are sealed. If you see a window slightly ajar, close the curtain immediately and kneel until the wind stops. If the wind sounds like it is calling your name, sing the national anthem loudly until you forget your own name. If you see hair overflowing from the toilet, do not flush. Gently comb the hair and place it in the trash can. Ensure your watch stays at 3:15 p.m. and do not let the second hand move. If it shakes violently, throw the watch away and pretend you have no hands. If you see a black dog in the hallway, do not feed it. That is the shadow of the previous director. If you see a headless man in a suit in the elevator, ask him for a lighter. Take it and put it in your pocket to protect your vision if the power goes out. All faucets emit water with a faint fishy smell, which is normal, but if you find pure clear water, pour it away immediately, and scream for help. Trash cans are emptied every 6 hours. If you see something alive wriggling inside, ignore it. Ensure your patient-ID number is an even number. If it becomes an odd number, exchange clothes with another patient immediately. If you hear someone playing soccer in the hallway at night, do not look out. That is not a soccer ball. If you discover your fingers starting to grow small scales, the center is adjusting your surface defense. Carry a live cicada with you. Its sound will help you locate the coordinates of the real world. In the garden, there is a dry well. If you hear a voice calling you from the bottom, throw in a piece of raw meat. Finally, if you find yourself no longer feeling fear, go to the operating room immediately. This means you are no longer human. Good luck staying alive until tomorrow's sun, even if that sun might be green. Keep your fear. Fear is the only sign that distinguishes you from them. Stay human, stay human, stay human. If you are reading this document, it means you have survived the 3-day internship observation period, and have officially become a green-clad medical staff member of the Tianxing Mental Health Center. Remember, this green uniform is not a symbol of status. It is your only protective layer. It has been soaked in a special mixture of formaldehyde and religious residue to effectively isolate most non-physical malice. First, the head nurse does not have only one head. If, during a shift handover, you notice fine cracks appearing on her neck, or a transparent mucus seeping out, pretend you see nothing and hand her a bottle of high-concentration saline. Never discuss the head nurse's appearance or physiological structure behind her back. The ventilation ducts in this building are not for circulating air. They are designed to amplify all whispers. Every sound will eventually reach her ears. If you accidentally offend her, you must cut off your left ear and place it in the medicine box before midnight as a token of your sincerity. Otherwise, the next morning, you will find yourself growing extrasensory organs that are anything but beneficial. When preparing medicine in the pharmacy, you must verify the labels on the bottles. If the text on a label is jumping frantically or attempting to rearrange itself into your name, it means the medicine is trying to escape and find a host. At this point, place the bottle into crushed ice immediately until the medicine becomes quiet due to the cold. This center never uses any known sedatives. We only provide memory dilution liquid. When feeding medicine to patients, if they refuse to open their mouths, do not use force. Simply whisper into their ear. This is the sole fuel specially prepared for you by the director. In most cases, the patient will comply due to the fear etched into their bones. If a patient spits out blue butterflies after taking the medicine, use a net to catch them and incinerate them on the spot. Those are fragments of their collapsing sanity, and they must never touch the walls, or the walls will learn how to think. Regarding the basement laundry room on level B1, although you were told in the visitor's manual that entry is prohibited, as a formal employee, you are required to go there once a week to collect clean, mimicry skin. The things tumbling inside the washing machines are not just clothes, but soul fibers from those who have lost their physical forms due to over-assimilation. If you see a familiar face reflected in the glass door of the washing machine, whether it be your parents or a deceased friend, do not stop your work, and certainly do not attempt to speak with it. In that place, maintaining cold indifference is your only weapon for preserving your selfhood. This center features a special correction room located in the northeast corner of the administrative building. If you feel your thoughts beginning to overlap, for example, if you can see two different corridors at once, or if you start to understand the whispers between shadows, enter the correction room immediately. There, you will see a surgical chair studded with human teeth. Sit in it and press the red reset button yourself. The process will be accompanied by the agony of your soul being torn apart. But this is better than becoming a creeper on the ceiling. Those things crawling on the ceiling were once intern doctors who refused correction. The director has no surname. He only appears in the shadows of the corridors. If you encounter a person wearing a black robe, without ankles, and smelling of rotting gardenias, move to the side of the road immediately, and bow deeply until the coldness has completely vanished. The director does not like to be stared at. His gaze can cause human blood to solidify into black crystals in an instant. Every Friday at 3 a.m., the center undergoes a total area cleansing. At that time, the sprinkler system will emit a pink, highly acidic liquid. This is not for disinfection, but to erase overflowing cognition. Ensure you enter the lead-coded observation room, and lock the door before 2:50 a.m. You will hear dense screams and the sound of frantic scratching against the doors in the hallway. Those are the unqualified samples being physically wiped out. Never look at the scene outside through the observation hole, because some things, before they melt, will engrave extreme curses into your retinas, ensuring you never know peace again. Finally, check your shadow regularly. If the edges of your shadow become blurred, or if extra limbs or deformed lumps begin to appear, go to the kitchen to borrow a rusty cleaver and decisively chop off the extra parts. This hospital is alive, and it hungers for every living creature that enters. Maintain your fear. It is the last proof of your humanity. I wish you a pleasant career at the Tianxing Center, until the day you are officially replaced. Specimen 0972 felt his fingertips beginning to melt. He sat on the edge of his narrow cot, eyes locked onto the corner of the room. The pale yellow wallpaper was shriveling and peeling like the skin of an ancient man, revealing the throbbing, dark red tissue beneath. The building was breathing. He could hear a muffled swallowing sound deep within the walls, as if the facility had just digested a visitor who hadn't been fast enough to put on a white lab coat. "You didn't take the pill," muttered Specimen 041, who sat on the opposite bed. 411's eyeballs had turned a dull, waxy gray. He bobbed his head mechanically, his voice sounding like sandpaper on stone. "I saw you, 0972. You hid the pill under your tongue and spat it into your pillow. Now, you can see the walls bleeding, can't you?" 0972 didn't answer. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. If he didn't take the medicine, the world transformed into this visceral hell. But if he did, he would become just like 0 forgetting he was once a human rights lawyer, forgetting he had a daughter waiting for him to come home. Suddenly, a sharp, scraping sound echoed from the corridor. It was the nurse in red. 0972 went rigid. The rules from Chapter 1 flashed through his mind, but rules were useless now. The footsteps stopped directly outside his door. The lock turned with a sour, metallic groan, and a distorted silhouette squeezed into the room. She wore a uniform so red it was almost black, and her face lacked features, save for a massive, gaping maw filled with needle-like teeth that tore diagonally across her head. "Time for your blood pressure," the nurse whispered, her voice a terrifying overlay of 1,000 screaming souls. 972 bolted. He didn't reach for the blood pressure cuff. Instead, he grabbed a metal spoon he had sharpened into a shank, and drove it deep into 0 thigh. 0 didn't scream, he simply began to giggle. The chaos distracted the nurse, and as her gaping maw turned toward the laughing man, 0972 sprinted out into the hallway. The space in the corridor was collapsing. The once straight hallway now curved like a giant intestine, and pink tendrils of raw nerve tissue dangled from the ceiling, reaching for his throat. He ran blindly, crashing past carts selling eyeball candies that crunched under his feet like dry bone. "The elevator, to level B2, he repeated to himself. The rules called it a forbidden zone, but forbidden zones were often the only exhaust vents in a living prison. He dived into the elevator and saw the glowing button that wasn't supposed to exist. When he slammed his thumb onto B2, the elevator didn't descend. Instead, it shook violently as the metal walls began to liquefy into a thick, black sludge. The doors hissed open. What awaited him was not a forest, but a vast, silent labyrinth made of tens of thousands of mirrors. In every mirror stood a version of 0972. Some were weeping, some were laughing, and others were slowly growing green scales across their cheeks. "Welcome to the real world," a voice whispered, a voice so gentle it made his skin crawl. He turned and saw the director. It wasn't a man in a black robe. It was a colossal, pulsating brain suspended in mid-air, with countless transparent nerve endings connected to every 0972 inside the mirrors. "You are the most resilient specimen yet." The director's nerve endings brushed against his face like silk. "You thought you were escaping. No, you were simply testing the purity of this fear for us. Now, look into the mirror." 0972 looked up. In the mirror, the metallic number on his chest was slowly burning away, replaced by a single line of text: "Spare organ for Director Wang." He let out a primal scream of despair and lunged at the mirror, trying to shatter the absurdity of his reality. But when his fist struck the surface, there was no sound of breaking glass, only the sensation of sinking into a cold liquid. His own reflection reached out and pulled him in. A second later, he was back in the ward on the 3rd floor. The pale yellow walls were clean and pristine. "Time for your blood pressure," a nurse in green said with a pleasant smile, holding out a single white pill. 0972 opened his mouth obediently and swallowed the medication. His eyes gradually grew dull and waxy. He looked out the window. The sun was shining, and the sky was a perfect, brilliant blue. "What is my name?" he asked softly. "You are 0972, the nurse said, tucking him in comfortably. "You are our most well-behaved patient." Outside in the garden, the little girl in the red dress finished burying a sparrow. She looked up at the security camera and offered a toothless, knowing smile. The 3rd experiment was a total success. The experiment is concluded. Director Wang stood on the terrace of the administrative building's top floor, adjusting his silk tie. Behind him, on the office door, the once blurry character for Wang now shimmered with a metallic luster, while the name, Li, which had led so many visitors to their doom, was peeling off the wall like dead skin. This was not a supernatural occurrence. It was a physical collapse triggered by the completion of a total cognitive rewrite. In the garden below, the sky was undergoing a terrifying transformation. The once pure blue was being corroded by an ink-like stain, spreading from the edges until the entire firmament turned a nauseating, fluorescent green. As the colors shifted, the green-clad medical staff, who had been performing their duties so diligently, stopped in unison. They stripped off their uniforms with synchronized precision, revealing the same scaled, mimetic skin as the patients beneath. As it turned out, there had never been any doctors here. The consciousness of specimen 0972 has been completely assimilated, A headless man, in a suit, stepped out from the shadows, idly flicking a blood-stained lighter. His fear was distilled to an extraordinary purity, enough to power the Level B2 mirror labyrinth for an entire year. Director Wong nodded, gazing into the distance. There, the main gates of the Tianxing Center were slowly grinding open. Several tour buses, filled with curious visitors, were crawling inside. These visitors leaned against the windows, taking photos and pointing at the grand architecture. None of them noticed that as the sentry saluted them, 3 black tentacles of varying lengths slithered out from beneath his sleeve. "Are the protocols for the next batch ready?" Director Wong asked. "They have already been distributed. We've made a few subtle adjustments this time. For instance, the nurse in red has been changed to the volunteer in blue, and we've added false leads regarding a Level B3. Humans are always fascinated by non-existent floors. The anxiety produced by that curiosity is the finest grade of nourishment." Meanwhile, in the ward on the 3rd floor, Specimen 0972 sat on the edge of his bed. He had just swallowed the white pill, and was experiencing an unprecedented sense of tranquility. He turned his head and saw his reflection in the window glass, grinning back at him with predatory malice. He did not attempt to shatter the glass as the rules had once instructed. Instead, he reached out and locked fingers with his reflection. "I can feel it now," 0972 whispered softly. "I am this building, and this building is me." His skin began to turn translucent. The fluid flowing through his veins was no longer red blood, but the alternating red and blue bioluminescent liquid, seen in the cracks of the basement. He looked up at the ceiling and saw that creepers, the things that once filled him with primal terror, lowering their silken threads to gently stroke his head like a mother comforting a child. The broadcast no longer played Jasmine Flower. Instead, it emitted a low-frequency hum that throbbed like a gargantuan pulse. As the humming reached a critical frequency, the green sun reached its zenith directly overhead. "The harvest begins," Director Wong said quietly. At that moment, the entire Tianxing Center vibrated violently. The pale yellow exterior of the building slid off entirely, revealing the inner structure, a massive cultivation rack made of tens of thousands of living, pulsating organs. The so-called wards, corridors, and elevators were merely the digestive tracts of a colossal biological entity, and the so-called survival rules were nothing more than a process to tenderize the meat through fear before it entered the gullet. Outside the gates, the new visitors stepped off the buses, clutching their tour brochures signed by Director Wong. The first line of the brochure read, "Welcome to the Tianxing Mental Health Center. Please remember, you are human." Director Wong looked down at the fresh livestock, and offered a benevolent, fatherly smile. He turned and walked into the glowing metal door, where the director's brain was waiting to exchange a new cycle of data with him. Under that sickly green sky, Specimen 0972 vanished completely. In his place, a single dried umbrella appeared on the hallway ceiling, hanging silently, waiting for the next rain of blood to fall.